My name is Demetrius Booth, and this is my week 4 oral midterm exam for Liberty University's Psychology IO course. For this first question in regards to how have recent historical events affected the course of research in IO, and for me to give an example. In order to understand where we are now, we have to look at how these theories have progressed. Org psychology is the scientific study of individuals and group behavior in a formal organizational setting. Organizational psychology uses scientific methods to study behavior in an organization. And majority of its efforts in individualized psychology took off in the early 20th century. One of these areas of interest goes back to the Hawthorne studies. The Hawthorne studies, a collaborative effort between Western Electric Company and a group of Hawthorne studies from folks at Harvard University, took place between 1927 and 1932. The original purpose of the study was to investigate the impact of environmental factors such as illumination, wage incentives, rest, pause on employee productivity. And as we look at current examples, we have to look at two areas of concern that I would like to bring forth, which is rapid deployment of communication technology and the recent pandemic that's happening around the world regarding COVID-19. Currently, I believe that organizational psychology has been affected by our ability to communicate with each other at all times. Literally, the world is at our fingertips at any given moment in time, and this could cause us to breach boundaries that did not exist before the technology boom. For example, we can be contacted at all moments of the day by our employer. Some jobs even give out laptops and phones so that you have the ability to connect and check email and answer calls and set up conferences. Because of the global market and globalization, we are operating on time zones that never end. And so you could find yourself at a family dinner, talking with your kids and still having to take a call or check an email. And so this has had an impact on our organizational individual psychology when it comes to being looked at inside of an organization. And so a recent example dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic that has gripped the globe, you have to look at social distancing, which is the new term that has been used, and our ability to telework, which goes right back into the development and deployment of communication technology. That we are able to do work from home, but that sense of social distancing, or what I would like to refer to as physical distancing, has impacted our ability to connect on an interpersonal level with people that we work with. All of these things coming together can impact the psychology of an organization when you have people who have not connected with each other, who have not spent any time in physical proximity, and there are other issues that have started to surface based on this very thing. Describing the socialization process for graduate students in the program where I work and its success on newcomers. I am in the United States Air Force, and so typically we do not get candidates who have completed grad school. That majority of the Air Force very close to 80% is enlisted, and primarily those individuals come directly out of high school into the United States Air Force. And then when we start to look at that smaller demographic of our commissioned officers, most of them enter with a bachelorate level degree, and that in order to have someone come in with their law degree or as a dentist or some other form of a medical doctor, that there is a specialized process where we recruit them. And so I will focus most of my effort on the recruitment process. Because I'm in the military, we always use acronyms. So the three S's: strategic planning, succession planning, and skill inventory. So as we look at candidates who stand the best chance of becoming successful and remaining in the organization over long periods of time, that is the strategic planning. But at the same time, we have to recognize that due to the nature of the work for folks who are in the military, that a part of this strategic planning also links in, because I believe the process is cyclic, succession planning as well. That when we look at the enlisted force, there is a high percentage of them, around like the 70% mark, that will not stay beyond their original enlistment. And so the folks who stay long enough to get a 20-year retirement, I believe it's around that 10% mark through attrition of high-year tenure, folks who are not getting promoted in a timely fashion, that they hit a gate where they have to separate for individuals who may get in trouble, and so they are administratively or disciplinary separated from the military. And so the strategic plan takes into account succession planning at the same time. As we explore skill inventory, coming in from high school, you do not have the skills necessary to do the job. And so there is a process in place where you go through basic military training, or if you're an officer, you go through either the Air Force Academy or our officers training program. And so everyone has these same touch points. After that touch point, then you go off to some form of technical school where we teach you the skills that are required for you to do the job. And so the plan and process in the military is to think strategically in our planning, to plan for a certain amount of attrition each year, and to ensure all new people coming in receive skill inventory or initial skills training to ensure that they are competent and confident in accomplishing the tasks that are required for them in their job. Additionally, is the program successful at socializing newcomers in this new job to create job embeddedness? And for most accounts, I would say yes, that we go from being an out-group member, or what we would call a civilian, to being in the military, or in my case, an American airman. That everyone has this shared experience, that every enlisted member has gone through basic military training at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. We all have that same touch point, that during graduation, there is a ceremony where you walk the bum run, and everyone does that exact same thing before they are shipped out to their technical training. We also have tribal artifacts in the form of unit patches and hats and designations that we carry. So not just wearing the military uniform alone, but we also will give you an organizational or unit patch. So no matter where you are, you will be able to look out and recognize that what organization that person belongs to inside of the Air Force. Additionally, a part of bringing that embeddedness into this in group where we start to see ourselves as a part of the team is our oaths and our creed. And so we have an airman's creed, and if you look out amongst all of the Department of Defense, regardless of what branch of service, there will be a creed, the soldier's creed, the sailor's creed. And so every airman has this creed that we have to memorize, that does this same process over and over again, where we say in unison, I am an American airman, and that brings identity. And then there are our oaths, that we have this oath of enlistment, or as an officer, you also take an oath. And so a part of our socialization process, whether you are enlisted or you are an officer, that everyone has these same exact touch points, that everyone goes to some form of technical skills training, that as we start to plan to bring new people in and recruit them, that we are realists and we know that at some point attrition will take a majority of our force away, that only about 10% make it to retirement at the 20-year mark, that we have these shared experiences, tribal artifacts, and our oaths and creeds that allow us to embed our new recruits into the United States Air Force. How can an organization reduce or prevent work-family conflict? And so there are some things that we have to begin to look out for if we are to prevent or to do some preventative care, preventative maintenance to reduce the level of conflict. Things to look out for: strain-based work interfering with family, or that strain of someone's family life interfering with their work. You have time-based, where family interferes with the time that you should be at work, or vice versa, work interfering with your family time, behavior at work and at home, and how they impact each other. And so, as I alluded to in question 1, that based on the deployment and development of updated communication and technology, that we have the world, and work is a part of the world, at our fingertips at all times. And family is also be able to connect and message us at all times, even when we are at work. And so there is a lack of boundary. And based on that boundary, it creates strain, time-based, and behavioral outcomes. So those are things to be on the lookout for. If you start to see some of those things happen, there are ways to reduce them. The first one that I will offer is family supportive supervisor behavior. That yes, the organization as a whole has its vision statement, its mission statement, but those first line supervisors are where the rubber meets the road. That most employees will never have that one-on-one interaction with the CEO of a company or the founder of that organization, but they will have one-on-one contact with their supervisors. And if those supervisors are not family supportive or don't have or exhibit those behaviors, then that is the start of the conflict, where an employee is conflicted on how much time they spend at work versus home, or when life happens with family, not being able to bring our whole selves to work, and vice versa. And so acknowledging that work-family issues support the employee attempt to balance work and family, and then most times, more importantly, modeling the behavior as a supervisor, where you recognize that there needs to be boundaries, where you aren't always burning the midnight oil, where they see, your employees see you take time away from work to focus on family. All of these things says that I am a family supportive supervisor when you can exhibit those behaviors. And then secondly, work-family integration, which is where you can blend the domains of home and work, juxtaposed to keeping them apart and compartmentalizing them. And so when that time comes, I believe it creates a sense of balance. That if one day at home that you have to join in on a conference call and maybe it is in the middle of dinner, that your family will be more understanding of that moment. One, if it does not constantly happen where it is the norm, and then two, if there is a family situation where work allows you to be with them, whether it is leaving early from work so that you can make your kids' soccer game, or being able to break away at lunch and take an extended lunch to take your kid to the dentist, or if there is a school project happening or a recital and in the middle of the workday you are able to leave work and attend your child's recital or accompany your wife to a doctor's appointment. And it's not seen as a negative in the organization, that when we are able to bring that balance, that we will be better off. If afforded the opportunity to develop a performance assessment program for employees, what techniques would I use? I found it somewhat comical to look towards Murphy's List because, of course, Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong. And so in order to ensure that we not only embed our employees into the organization so they go from that out group to the in group of belonging, that we also set them up for success to ensure that they not only receive the skills inventory that is required to accomplish the job, but that along the way that there are forms of coaching and feed forward and feedback that allows them to gauge their work, to gauge their behaviors. And so I offer you that as we look at that, we have to look at in roles and extra roles, that what tasks need to be accomplished and how are we gauging those behaviors. So task-oriented behaviors, that we are looking when we do feedback on how well the employee accomplished or performs the task associated with the job. And that as we start to look at extra roles of interpersonal behaviors, downtime behaviors, and whether or not some of their behaviors are destructive or hazardous, when it comes to interpersonal oriented behaviors, what happens interpersonally at the job? How are you connecting with the other employees? And not only how you are connecting, how are you supporting? How are you lifting them up? Are they lifting you up? How well do we work as a team? And then your behaviors outside of work could affect your job performance. For example, in the United States military, regardless of what state laws exist, it is illegal for us to take any forms of drugs. One of the things that is happening now around the country is that marijuana is starting to become legalized. So currently in Colorado, it is legalized in that state, but we have an Air Force base and the Air Force Academy there. It is still illegal according to the Uniform Code of Military Justice for members of the Air Force or any member of any branch of service to partake in those illicit drugs. Also, when it comes to alcohol use, it is written in our policies that you are not allowed to consume alcohol so many hours prior to work, depending on the job. And so if you are a military policeman, you can't consume any alcohol 8 hours prior to coming and being armed up to protect personnel and resources. If you are a flyer, a pilot, those hours are adjusted slightly. And then we have the addition of crew rest, where even if you are not partaking in alcohol, that you are required to get a certain amount of sleep before you come in. And so your downtime behaviors can have an effect on how you do the job. And then when it comes to destruction or destructive and hazardous behaviors, safety violations, sabotage, accidents. All of these things feed into each other. And so I would establish a process where you would have quarterly performance feedback sessions with your direct supervisor so that you can gauge your performance as the year progresses. Of course, there would be an annual appraisal done to allow conversation on whether or not you met expectations, whether or not you accomplished the goals that had been set out each quarter. And so these feedback sessions should gauge you along the way. Additionally, I would add in the process for on-the-job training. So coming into the organization, we would provide on-the-job training, and a part of this embeddedness is also to link you with your supervisor so that they can go over work center safety items, what's expected in the job, coach you through your goals and aspirations, to help you monitor that quarterly through feedback sessions, and then to do an annual appraisal to make sure that you understand where the organization sees you in the performance of your job. And then our final question, what are some possible common organizational constraints and how could they lead to counterproductive behavior or counterproductive work behavior, CWB? Some of the organizational constraints that can exist are environmental constraints, unnecessary rules and regulations, and then policies that waste employees' time. And so for environmental constraints, that could come down to poor equipment. When we look at unnecessary rules and regulations, those can be seen as things that strip away agency and autonomy of the employees to do the job that they have been paid to do. And so those things contribute to counterproductive work behavior. And so there are two forms of counterproductive work behavior: person-based and situation-based. And so when we start to look at persons-based, we have conscientiousness, trait anger, self-control, and then narcissism. That based on the feelings or the constraints that a person may perceive are in place, they will start to have feelings of frustration. If they have an external locus of control, which means they believe that they have low control or they have a lack of agency or autonomy, and that may come in the way of policy, how their supervisors behave, that they start to become destructive. And inside of that destructiveness, you can have anger trait, lack of self-control, where they lash out over impulse, or narcissism. And so conscientiousness is an important factor when it comes to positive work behaviors, because if you are a conscientious employee, that means that you are someone who will do what you say you will do, that you will give your absolute best to the organization. And the reverse of that is that you will not give your best, that you will not concentrate, that there will be moments where you will take back your time because you believe that the organization has not valued you. And then that leads into self-control and trait anger. Also, narcissism is the belief that you should get something based on the talents that you believe that you have. And so these behaviors lead to counterproductive work organization behavior, because not only does it impact you and the actual work that you have been assigned to perform, when other people's start to, or other employees start to compare themselves for what they are being paid, juxtaposed to what you are being paid, and the level or output or productivity from themselves and you, that also creates a problem within inside of the organization. Situation based is the other, the norms, stress, and injustice. And so just like you can have positive norms, you can also have negative norms within inside of an organization. If these norms are seen as negative, where people are allowed to not do the work that they have been assigned, where they are seeing other employees get away with disrespect to each other or supervisors, that thing can now become the norm within inside of the organization. Then leads into stress, and then injustice, where something may happen to you and you believe that it is unjust, and so then you begin to act out. At the end of the day, we are all fighting this invisible values battle, where we are seeking to have autonomy and agency. We are seeking to be safe. We are seeking to be respected. We are seeking to be valued, to be seen as competent, and inclusion, to be included in the organization. And at any moment, any of those things have actually or perception-wise have been stripped away from us. We begin to exhibit counterproductive work behavior if we have a low sense of control or external locus of control. These are the references that I used in answering all areas of this oral midterm exam.